Let's talk about Barbenheimer, probably the biggest internet event pop culture moment of the year. On July 21st, 2023, Barbie and Oppenheimer were both released, with both films garnering not only critical, but also box office success. It was a cultural moment. It was so big, Hollywood's probably wondering how to make another one right now. How do we make another Barbenheimer? So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. Barbenheimer in general, and what made it so successful in such a moment, and whether or not Hollywood can create another just like it. Can they ever make another Barbenheimer?
We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means.
To answer it bluntly, will they be able to create another Barbenheimer? Technically and theoretically, yes, but realistically and actually, probably no. Let me explain it further, and while doing so, also talk about the origin of Barbenheimer. So, can they make another Barbenheimer? Theoretically and technically, yes. And I'm saying that because Barbenheimer as a concept in general is not a new thing. Counterprogramming is a concept in marketing. In this case, a concept in marketing within the entertainment industry. What is counterprogramming? When an entertainment project, let's say a movie, is released with marketing targeted towards a specific demographic, let's say an adult male demographic. It's not uncommon for a different studio to release a movie targeting a different demographic at the same time. For example, let's say Studio A is releasing a Batman movie, and that Batman movie is marketed towards men. A different studio is probably going to look at that and say, hey, this Batman movie is marketed towards men. What about the women? What if they don't want to watch that? We should release a movie at around the same time and market that towards the women. In this case, what happened in real life was that there was Batman, released, targeted towards men, so a different studio came and said, let's make Mamma Mia and market that towards women. Another example is when we had Star Wars The Force Awakens, which more or less was mainly targeting a male demographic, and to counter-program that, we had Sisters, which was for a female demographic. It was a combo of Passengers and Assassin's Creed, which was mostly for an older, more adult demographic, and also there was Sing, which was more for a children's demographic or a family demographic. And as a side note, these demographics are mostly all the time just broken down to the most basic of qualities. I understand that a lot of these movies have cross-demographic appeal. And just as a disclaimer, I'm not invalidating anyone for liking any movie. When I say something like Mamma Mia was marketed towards women, I mean just that the studios tried to sell it to women. I'm not saying it's a movie that only women should enjoy, not at all. I'm not a woman, I love that movie. Anyone can like a movie they like, regardless of what demographic they belong to or who the movie was intentionally marketed to. So counter-programming, simply put, if you're a Hollywood studio selling your movie to demographic A, then a different studio is probably going to attempt counter-programming by making a movie and selling it to demographic not A on the same date. You get it. It's sort of like a way for studios to offer alternatives for consumers, like saying, oh, you don't want that film? Here's another option which is very different from that. So that's how Barbenheimer came to exist in the first place, counter-programming. The studios wanted to give you a choice. If Oppenheimer wasn't your vibe, then here's a very different movie, Barbie, that you might want to try, and vice versa. I'm a huge fan of Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and they were basically the reason for how I learned about counter-programming in its most basic sense. Their film, Sisters, was released on the same day as The Force Awakens. Very different films marketed towards different demographics. But Fey and Poehler taking on Star Wars was very much a narrative that was part of a very fun marketing campaign for Sisters. Amy and Tina even joked in interviews that they told the studio the only way they would agree to do Sisters was if it was releasing on the same day as Star Wars and that they were taking on Star Wars in a fight. It made for a fun part of the press tour, and Sisters even released a video on YouTube poking fun at Star Wars called The Force Awakens.
And that's the way you want it to be, really.
It could not be more exciting to see the way that technology has evolved, and yet keeping one foot in the pre-digital world.
I still watch that video from time to time. It's so stupid and funny.
That's not even Chewbacca.
No, it's not him. No, it's not.
I don't know what she's doing.
No.
That year, Star Wars was number 1, Alvin and the Chipmunks was number 2, and Sisters was number 3. Marketing people would tell you that demographically, Star Wars was targeting the male audience, Alvin and the Chipmunks the children, and Sisters the women. Although yes, you can make the argument that there are some people who exist in real life who would be interested in more than one of these films, probably maybe even all three of these films. I myself, during that time, was interested in both the Star Wars movie and the Sisters movie. I'm just saying that from the perspective of the studios, these were who they were selling the movie to. this isn't a thing that just happens with movies either. Sometimes studios do counter-programming in response to other things happening, like releasing movies during major sporting events. Typically, those major sporting events cater to a male audience, so the movies releasing this time would be movies that don't cater to that male audience. So probably movies that cater to women. Apparently 2013's Warm Bodies with Nicholas Hoult was released on the same weekend as the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl being a thing mostly marketed towards adult men, and Warm Bodies being a romance targeted towards young adults and women. Counter-programming can also happen in video games, although maybe less intentionally and less frequently. Animal Crossing New Horizons and Doom Eternal were both released on March 20, 2020, and that kind of had the same meme cultural event feeling that Barbenheimer had, although to a much smaller degree. And so, well, yes, technically, theoretically, there will be another Barbenheimer, in the sense of having two different movies being different tonally and catering to different demographics being released at the same time. Yes, there will be plenty more, as there have been plenty before. But really, let's be honest here. Will there be another Barbenheimer? In the sense of, being this iconic pop culture moment, with the same level of virality, with the same level of both financial and cultural success, with the same level of being an event? Will there be another Barbenheimer with the same level of impact and, dare I say, iconicness? Well, probably not.
With such a weapon. But we have no choice.
In my original outline for the script for this video, this is the part where we discuss the scale of Barbenheimer's success and then attempt to understand how it got that level of success. But upon researching this video, I learned about a situation regarding Nolan and Warner Brothers that I think is relevant to how Barbenheimer came to be, and counter-programming aside, I think it would be incomplete to tell the origin of Barbenheimer without this part. So here it is. The alleged Nolan versus Warner Brothers. Christopher Nolan had a long-standing relationship with Warner Brothers. Since 2002, Nolan's films have all been distributed by the company. The Batman trilogy, Interstellar, Inception, Dunkirk, Tenet, all Nolan films distributed by Warner Brothers. In December of 2020, while we were all in the throes of the pandemic, Warner Media, the parent company of Warner Brothers Pictures, announced that all of its upcoming 2021 films were now going to be released on streaming, specifically on HBO Max, on the same day as they release in theaters. Granted, it was a pandemic, and a lot of theaters were closed, so I guess it might have seemed like a sound business decision from Warner Brothers, but Nolan criticized this decision, stating, "Some of our industry's biggest filmmakers and most important movie stars went to bed the night before thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service. Warner Brothers had an incredible machine for getting a filmmaker's work out everywhere, both in theaters and in the home, and they are dismantling it as we speak. They don't even understand what they're losing. Their decision makes no economic sense." Nolan wasn't the only one who criticized Warner Brothers' decision. There was a lot of backlash from other filmmakers, production companies, the Directors Guild of America, and movie theater owners, especially since they weren't informed of the decision by Warner Brothers ahead. According to Deadline, Warner Brothers even had to spend $200 million just as compensation towards the talent involved in the movies that were getting released on streaming the same day as on theaters. It wasn't exactly a successful decision on Warner Brothers' part. On March 2021, they announced they would discontinue the same-day streaming release strategy. That said, even with the same-day streaming release strategy discontinued, Nolan had already decided to have his next film be distributed by another studio, ending up with Universal Studios for Oppenheimer. One of Nolan's conditions in his deal with Universal Pictures apparently states that Oppenheimer has to have a 100-day theatrical release window to make sure the film doesn't get chucked into streaming services immediately. And honestly, good on Nolan. Good for him. He was right in the end, and Oppenheimer turned out to not only be a great film, but also a box office success for Universal and him, But apparently Warner Brothers originally had a Coyote vs. Acme film scheduled for release on July 21, 2023, but for some reason, and maybe the Coyote vs. Acme film was taking longer than expected to develop, in April 2022, Warner Brothers announced Barbie was taking the July 21 spot, putting it directly on the same date as and in direct competition with Oppenheimer. People have speculated that Warner Brothers did this as some sort of a revenge on Nolan, as some sort of a way to get back at him for ending his collaborative relationship with them. And I kind of think it is, but this is just speculation. Warner Brothers have stated that they wanted to reconcile with Nolan, but if that were true, why put Barbie in direct competition with Nolan's film? Why not move it? If you really wanted to have a relationship with Nolan that could be reconciled later, why put your blockbuster in direct competition with his? I mean, in the end, it worked out well for both of the films, both Oppenheimer and Barbie, and for counter-programming, yeah, it worked. But from an artistic and relationship perspective, it just feels so mean-spirited for Warner Brothers to do. They did ask Nolan if a split with Warner really was the cause for Barbie's release date. Nolan just laughed and he said he was not going to answer that question. I don't think... Nolan is British, right? But I don't think he sounds like that. He also gave a very diplomatic and polite statement saying, "A crowded marketplace with a lot of different movies, and those of us who care about movies are thrilled about that." Sorry, Nolan. But good for Nolan. Yeah, Barbie might have happened partly as counter-programming, but it may have also happened partly because someone at Warner Brothers was a messy bitch who lives for drama. But that's alleged, so who knows?
I'm a messy bitch who lives for drama.
Watch me dance, dance the night away. My heart could be...
Now let's talk about the success of Barbenheimer.
They won't fear it.
This truly could have been an abysmal year for blockbusters. You guys, there were a lot of underperformances this year. Shazam 2, Quantumania, Dungeons & Dragons, which is amazing, by the way, so please watch Dungeons & Dragons wherever you can as soon as possible. Even Fast 10, which made $700 million, mind you, but according to Variety, only barely crawled into the black, so it was only barely not a loss. It had a $340 million production budget, without marketing costs, so it was truly looking like a grim year for blockbusters, and in some ways it still does, but Barbenheimer managed to be such a big event and pulled through. Everyone was hyped for it, and both movies, Barbie and Oppenheimer, became huge successes. Barbie opened at number 1 and Oppenheimer at number 2, but the thing that impressed everyone even more about this is that both movies had legs. They didn't just make a lot of noise and make a lot of money on week 1 and started free-falling in the next following weeks. No, they had good legs. As of the making of this video, Barbie is now the highest grossing Warner Brothers film in all of the studio's history. Barbie's also currently the second highest grossing movie of 2023, and as it's still in theaters, everyone expects it to be number 1. Oppenheimer is the 4th highest grossing film of 2023, and the 2nd highest grossing R-rated film of all time. This is a historical biopic that's nearly 3 hours long, it's R-rated, it's a drama. The fact that this is doing numbers like these is just splendid, and it makes me feel so amazed because that means cinema isn't dead. That means that people are still willing to go out and watch great films even if those films aren't superhero blockbusters. And I'm a giant consumer of superhero movies, series, superhero media in general, but we have come to a point where it started feeling like studios weren't willing to fund movies and theatrical releases unless they're big action flicks. It felt like we've come to a point where almost every major studio just wants to make a tentpole action film that can lead into a franchise. And as much as I love that, I don't want every movie in the theaters to be just that. There can't be homogeneity in a healthy entertainment industry. In the past couple of years, it's felt like that's the only thing you'll find in the theaters, this action movie with a lot of CGI and explosions. And that's just not a good thing. That's not good for the industry, and that's not good for the art. So Oppenheimer making a lot of money hopefully also tells Hollywood that the people are here and we're willing to watch these types of films. And likewise, the success of Barbie hopefully tells Hollywood that we're also here and willing to watch more stories told by women. But who are we kidding? This is Hollywood. What are they going to take away from Barbie? That we should give more opportunities for women to tell their stories? No. What they're taking away from it right now, apparently, is that people want to watch more movies based on toys. You can't make this up.
This doll is back in a box.
Even if nobody else...
Saw Patrol, and why Barbenheimer was a thing in the first place. Well, here we are. The next Saw movie is slated to release on the same day as Paw Patrol. For those who don't know, Saw is a horror film franchise focusing on people being trapped in torture devices, getting their heads crushed and body parts cut and whatnot, and Paw Patrol is a children's franchise about search and rescue dogs who go on adventures, and it's bright, and it's colorful, and it's for children. And they're both releasing on the same day, so people are like, the next Barbenheimer? And they're calling this Saw Patrol, because Saw and Paw Patrol, you get it. But yeah, the next Barbenheimer? Probably not, and this is the part where we talk about why Barbenheimer was such a big deal in the first place. Mainly because of two things. First of all, the dichotomy between Barbie and Oppenheimer. Like, tonally, Barbie is this bright, colorful, girly girl, pink fashion doll for children, and Oppenheimer is, like, literally known as the father of the atomic bomb. You know, that thing that caused, like, a lot of deaths. So it's this contrast of pink and sleigh bestie and Yas Queen versus, you know, death. Death. These two films releasing on the same day, and people found that interesting. This idea of, Barbie versus Oppenheimer, Barbie versus an atomic bomb, people found it amusing. And well, yes, Paw Patrol and Saw, they do have that interesting contrast. On one hand, you have cute dogs, and on the other, you have torture. They have the contrast, but they don't have the second thing that Barbenheimer had, and that is the attached talent. Christopher Nolan doing Oppenheimer? Already am interested. This is a man with an impressive filmography, undeniable talent. Then Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh. Florence Pugh! This was already going to be a hit. The amount of talent already attached to Oppenheimer. Then on the other hand, Margot Robbie, producer. Okay, but also as Barbie? There cannot be a more perfect choice than Greta motherfucking Gerwig, director and writer. Noah Baumbach on the script too, Ryan Gosling, Issa Rae, everyone else on the cast too is great, rising talents with recognizable names and great works under their belts. So not only do these two movies have the contrasting tones, but also both on their own, even if they were released separately, they each have the talent attached to them that could hype you up. Even if they were released separately, on their own, just with the names and the talent attached to them alone, Barbenheimer would not be as big of a hit if Amy Schumer was Barbie, let's be real. Or if any other director was directing it. Nobody else has the filmography thematically solid and perfectly suited enough to make people as hyped for a Barbie movie as Greta Gerwig. So the talent was really here. Both were good movies by known good filmmakers, and what ended up happening was instead of choosing either or, people decided they were going to watch both. Barbenheimer ended up being treated as a double feature by most people. Originally intended as counter-programming, where one was a choice given for people who didn't want to watch the other, ended up being a complementary and even say necessary pair. People were planning their entire days around watching the two movies. It was a thing, it was an event in your life. And the third thing, I know I said there were only two things, but hey, whatever, here's the third thing. This was a natural thing that people collectively made happen. Yes, marketing executives chose to release Barbie and Oppenheimer on the same day, but I'm pretty sure they didn't expect or foresee just how big and successful it was going to be, because people, we made it the thing. It was an event that we collectively wanted to and actually made happen. We were all on social media being excited, saying we wanted to watch both, making memes, making plans with our friends, planning clothes, excited that there was this thing that we were all a part of. There was a sense of community there that we made, and that's something that marketing executives can try to replicate, but it's never going to be as successful or feel as good as this, because this was a thing that kind of just happened because people really liked it and wanted it to happen. And you just can't manufacture that. You can try your best and hope it all works out.
Be over. Our boys would come home.
So can there be another Barbenheimer? Technically and theoretically, yes. If there are two films in the future with hugely contrasting tones to a comical degree, and both films have great talent attached to them and people are interested, then yes. And I would love for there to be another Barbenheimer. I love movies, and when there are viral movie moments like this with a lot of people being interested in movies, it makes me happy. That way I can share my appreciation of movies with others and I feel less alone. But realistically, it'll probably be difficult because it can't be a manufactured thing. It is, in many ways, being viral. People like it and want it to happen, it'll go big. But if you manufacture it, you'll just end up looking desperate. So Saw Patrol, probably not. I can see it going the way Morbius did, where people make a meme out of it. But maybe if Paw Patrol was directed by Catherine Bigelow, or Spielberg, or Jordan Peele, and it was starring Meryl Streep. And maybe if Saw was directed by Wes Anderson and starring Tom Cruise, I don't know. Good films.
I'm not good enough for anything.
But yeah, all this talk of counter-programming and demographics and the like, in the end, those are marketing things that marketing people use to guide themselves regarding who to sell their movies to. If you're an artist, of course, don't think about demographics. If you're a writer, director, just make your movie, just make your art, and let the marketing people worry about who to sell it to. Of course, it is going to be hard to find funding for your film if Hollywood execs don't think that they can sell it. So I guess demographics do come into play. But hey, Hollywood executives don't always know everything. Marvel took so long to make a Black Panther and Captain Marvel movie because there was an executive at Marvel, allegedly, Ike Perlmutter, who believed that movies with black people and women as leads wouldn't make any money. And look at how wrong he was. Oppenheimer was mostly marketed towards an adult skewing male audience. Barbie marketed towards both young and adult women, and everyone kinda just watched both. What happened? It's one of those things that you just can't reduce to demographics. It's not gender related or age related. It's just that everyone wants to see a good movie. And look, there's two of them on the same day. If you're still watching this video, thank you so much. I am a small channel, so a like would really help, and you know, a comment maybe, and hey, maybe a subscribe. It would help me out a lot. And that's it. Until next time, I'm out.